Within a dark and menacing castle, the Demon Lord is getting ready to begin his conquest to take over the world, and to do that, he summons his 4 demonic generals: Alandras the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Gnome the Earthen Bastion, and finally he summons the most cynical and soulless of them all, an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denkis started working for his company as an insignificant salaryman, but he was hope-filled, and surely he would make his way up the promotion ladder at some point. However, while Denkis was working hard for the sake of the company, his colleagues were all kissing up to their boss, so they ended up getting promotions while Denkis ended up getting shipped off to another country to work on expansion. Upon arrival, Denkis found that literally nothing was getting done because the site had no funding. He tried to convince his boss to approve more funding so they could buy the necessary equipment, but that would cost money, so his boss refused and yelled at him for wasting money. The locals couldn't care less about the job if they weren't going to be given the necessary tools, so they left and Denkis ended up having to do everything by himself. However, after seeing how hard Denkis was working even though he was by himself, the locals were inspired and soon returned to help him out. But just when he finally got everything up and running, he had a call from his boss, and at first he thought his hard work was finally being recognized so he would be getting a much-needed bonus. But he was dead wrong. They didn't even throw him a pizza party. All he got in return for his hard work was even more work as they decided to transfer him to another country for a separate expansion project. By this point, Denkis had begun to question his life choices because he realizes that he is wasting his life for a company that clearly doesn't care about him. But while he is distracted by his existential dread, he isn't paying attention to his surroundings, so he ends up getting run over by Moped-kun. That kind of explains how he ended up here, but Denkis thinks there must have been some kind of mistake because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. However, the Demon Lord calls him by name and tells him that he summoned him here to become his new overseas manager. He's received extensive reports on all the hard work Denkis had put in. He was assigned to an overseas branch of his company, learned the local language, and gained the trust of the locals to successfully run the new business. That is why the Demon Lord thinks Denkis would be the perfect candidate for one of his 4 elite generals. Denkis is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has ever actually acknowledged all the hard work he has been putting in, but he is a bit hesitant to accept the position of Demon General, because that would technically mean he is betraying humanity. However, the Demon Lord mentions that the position will come with full workers' benefits, and all of a sudden, Denkis doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. On top of that, the Demon Lord actually respects workers' rights, so he won't force Denkis to accept the position if he doesn't want to. All this makes Denkis really want to join. When he thinks about it, he remembers how he was always treated like trash back in his old company, and he doesn't think trash like him deserves to have such an important job, so he is about to reject the Demon Lord's offer. But before he does, the Demon Lord yells that he can't let the way he was treated at his former company dictate his worth. That place was run by obnoxious and selfish managers who only cared about themselves, so they would never pay attention to all the work Denkis was putting in behind the scenes. But the Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he is well aware of how valuable Denkis is as an employee. So will he choose to go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or will he stay here and help build the Demon Army? Denkis is still a little hesitant to accept, but all of a sudden, Alandras speaks up and says she objects to the idea of having a weak human in the Demon Army. Sylphid and Gnome also object to the idea because they can't see how someone like him could possibly help the Demon Army. The Demon Lord understands why they would be skeptical, so he decides to put Denkis through a test to show the others just how capable he really is. Denkis starts freaking out and tries to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers, so he can't fight, but it's already too late because Alandras has decided to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers, so tells Denkis to try and stop her deadly kick. However, before the kick could land, the Demon Lord steps in front of her and stops it. Alandras asks why the Demon Lord interrupted her, but he points out that she didn't wait for him to finish talking, so she ended up misunderstanding the situation. Look at poor Denkis over there, he got so scared that he passed out from the shock. The others are surprised because Alandras wasn't even trying that hard, so for Denkis to pass out from an attack like that, it makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The Demon Lord tells them that Denkis really is just a regular human, and that makes them all object to the decision even more. The Demon Army is made up entirely of monsters, so if a human were to enter the power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, then he would get eaten alive almost instantly. The Demon Lord admits that there is a bit of friction between the factions of his army, But that's exactly why he needs Denuske and his skill set. He doesn't expect him to have a sturdy body or incredible attack power, but rather what he expects from him is his resourcefulness. Just then, Denuske finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like what Olmundr just tried to hit him with. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but the Demon Lord does intend to give Denuske a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes, and so far they've managed to reach an agreement with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe has been quite difficult, so Denuske's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denuske's superb negotiation skills, it should be simple enough to gain the Minotaur's trust and reach an amicable agreement, but Denuske doesn't see anything simple about negotiating with Minotaurs. However, the Demon Lord seriously believes he can pull it off, so he tells Denuske to ask Olmundr if he has any questions. Afterwards, Olmundr leads Denuske down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaurs. But she thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denuske can negotiate with Minotaurs. Denuske thinks she's right about him being useless, but the Demon Lord seems so sincere when he was talking about how much he needed Denuske, and all Denuske has ever wanted was to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations of him as much as he can. Just then, Olmundr tells Denuske that they've arrived at the meeting room where the chief of the Minotaur tribe is staying, and Denuske is a bit shocked by the sheer size of the room, but Olmundr explains that it's perfectly normal since the Minotaurs are big monsters. And as a fair warning, she tells him that Minotaurs are known to be quite ferocious, so if he's not careful, he's going to end up getting himself trampled to death. As Olmundr opens the door, Denuske has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Terius without instantly dying. Olmundr feels bad for him, so she offers to help him out with the negotiations, and Denuske is really thankful for the help. But then he sees Olmundr start arguing with Terius, so he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. Olmundr doesn't understand how Terius could be dissatisfied with everything they've provided for him, and Terius says she doesn't understand what he's saying, so no headway is made on the pact, and Olmundr leaves the meeting room. Olmundr really doesn't understand why it's so hard for Terius to agree to the pact now when he was initially open to the idea. Just when they were about to finalize the agreement, he started yelling nay, nay over and over again. Olmundr came back several times to see if he would agree to the pact again, but all he would ever say was nay, so she couldn't understand what he wanted. Olmundr can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denuske to figure out, although she fully expects him to fail miserably. Denuske starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess, but as he is walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender gets him a warm towel to calm him down, and Denuske orders a drink while he sits down to think. He would like to work on the negotiations, but there's nothing he can do if the client refuses to negotiate. However, Denuske then realizes that Terius might not actually be refusing to negotiate after all. He has experienced a situation like this before where a client was constantly telling him no, but when he looked into the client's eyes, he could tell what he really meant, and both sides were eventually able to reach an agreement. He now knows what he needs to do, so he finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do: negotiate. Meanwhile, Olmundr is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Terius, and it didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denuske will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today, but the Demon Lord still has faith in him, so he tells her to wait and see what Denuske can accomplish. She doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denuske, but she decides to go check up on him to see if he's alright, and when she does, she finds him in the process of stuffing several bags with hay. She asks him what he's doing, so he tells her that he intends to go have a good conversation with Terius. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since he's not willing to negotiate, but Denuske still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Terius in the eyes and convey his emotions properly, so the two of them can understand each other. Olmundr notices that Denuske looks a lot more confident than he did before, and without an ounce of fear this time, he walks into the meeting room to talk to Terius. The next morning, Olmundr comes into the meeting room to check if Denuske is still alive, but when she looks inside, all she finds is a room full of hay, and neither Denuske nor Terius in sight. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then, Denuske comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she demands to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Denuske tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord, but Alandras can't believe Denuske managed to get him to agree in just one night. He explains that he simply took the time to get to know Terius well, and that made the negotiation process really easy. Alandras had thought Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept yelling nay over and over, but in reality, Terius thought negotiations were going really well. Denuske had experienced something like this before with an international client, and the client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him, so Denuske thought the negotiation was going to end in failure. But to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, so he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius, so Denuske did a little research into Minotaur culture and found out that Minotaurs always bring hay with them to act as their bed whenever they go to someone else's home. So all that time, he was just trying to ask for his hay. And when Denuske figured that out, there were no more problems with the negotiation. Now, Alandras realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad. But Terius tells her it's alright since it was an honest mistake and shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius is leaving, the Demon Lord comes up to Denuske and Alandras and asks Alandras if she now understands why he wants to add Denuske to their ranks. Alandras admits that Denuske really is skilled when it comes to negotiating, and since he passed the Demon Lord's test, the Demon Lord officially makes him one of his 4 generals and puts a bracelet on his arm as a symbol of his position. And as a sign of her new respect for Denuske, Alandras formally introduces herself to him and says she looks forward to working with him as a new friend. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.